start with a plant tonight in honor of California Native Plant Week. This is a very special plant. It is the Franciscan manzanita, Arctostaphylos franciscana. This was a plant that was thought to be extinct, and it has a tie-in to our guests today, folks from the California Native Plant Society. Their executive director stumbled across this growing in San Francisco, and one plant, and it was cloned, it was brought into botanical gardens, it was brought into nurseries, and here it is today. You can buy it at the Theodore Payne Foundation. I bought mine with my substantial staff discount for 25%. And I'm gonna plant it in my garden pretty soon. And I hope you guys all can plant something cool like this in your garden that brings you meaning and joy, and we can celebrate California Native Plant Week together. So I'm Evan Meyer, the Executive Director at the Theodore Payne Foundation. I want to introduce my co-host, Margaret Oakley. Hi, Margaret, how are you?
Hi, hello, Evan, and hello, everyone. Happy California Native Plant Week. It's great to be here doing episode 2 of the Poppy Hour. Evan, should we talk a little bit about what the Poppy Hour is?
Yes. So if you didn't get last week, Poppy Hour is basically a 2-part show. The first part is the practical side of California native plants. It's about how do you grow California native plants? Why would you choose a certain plant in a certain place? How do you build a path through your garden? How do you irrigate those plants? And what we're going to show those gardens to you, homeowners, people who have beautiful gardens. You'll be able to walk around and see them and meet horticulturalists, meet experts, meet designers. And the second part is going to be conversation, where we delve deeply into some way that plants or the landscape interact with broader culture in our lives. And the goal with this show is to, form some collective ideas about how we can move our region towards a more sustainable and biodiverse future, which is the mission of Theodore Payne Foundation, the mission of many of our guests, and I think probably the mission of many of our listeners is to make the world more beautiful and interesting. And so those are the conversations we'll be having. Yeah, that's Poppy Hour. We actually have them.
Oh, go ahead, Evan.
I was going to say, we have some sponsors for Poppy Hour episode 2. And Margaret, would you be able to kindly thank them?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I see Poppy Hour a little bit differently than you. I see it as, it might be because I'm in graduate school for art right now, but I think of this more as a collaborative art project that is made possible by the technical innovations of our time. It's very experimental to be doing a live internet style show via Zoom. And from my perspective, all of us are doing this sort of cross-disciplinary collaborative project. We're forming a collective, and it's, Theodore Payne staff, our guests on the show, the people who are tuning in and asking questions in the chat function here on Zoom, or the comment section on YouTube. And also our sponsors are part of this sort of ad hoc networked collective. So it's really exciting to be a part of, and everyone is contributing, which I think is really, really interesting. Yeah, so we have sponsors for Poppy Hour, which is really exciting. So I'll start off with thanking them. First off, I want to thank the Gottlieb Native Garden, and I actually have the photo in my background was taken by Susan Gottlieb. It's her first Matilaha poppy bloom of the season. The Gottlieb Native Garden is supporting the entire first season of this show. We're aiming to have a 7-episode show. And what is the Gottlieb Native Garden? It's a flourishing California native plant ecosystem located just a couple of miles from Rodeo Drive in the heart of Beverly Hills. They have an incredible website, and in non-pandemic times, they host many special events that inspire native plant gardening. So you can visit them at thegottliebnativegarden.com. And throughout this season, I hope that we can do some giveaways, because they're publishing 3 new books about the garden, and we can do free giveaways for our viewers there. So Thank you, Gottlieb Native Garden. Okay. And we'd like to thank the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, who also has come in and sponsored the entire 7-episode first season of the Poppy Hour. LADWP promotes outdoor water efficiency through their $3 a square foot turf replacement rebate. That is still going on right now. Visit ladwp.com/landscaping for turf replacement rebate program details and garden resources. There you can access virtual garden tours and learn more about workshops to help improve your outdoor water efficiency. You can also apply directly for your turf replacement rebate at socalwatersmart.com. We'll put the links to all of these websites out as well. And thirdly, we have the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California sponsoring today's episode and next week's episode through their community partnering program. Native plants are the perfect candidates for Metropolitan's turf replacement rebate. And for more information and educational resources, you can visit bewaterwise.com.
Thank you so much to our sponsors. We actually kind of view them as partners too, because their missions are very much in line with what we're trying to do at Theodore Payne Foundation. I want to mention something that we got some great comments and emails in, and I want to just address one on the top here. Someone wrote in and kind of was talking about our political discussions last week, which were pretty mild, but I do appreciate that their sentiment that this is not a political show. This is a show about love of nature, love of gardens, and love of plants. But I need to make the disclaimer that we're all just being ourselves here. These are our personal opinions. They don't reflect our organizations in any way. They definitely don't reflect our sponsors. And while it's not a political show, we're going to be talking about subjects that do touch politics. So, land conservation, biodiversity conservation, how we manage our wild lands. Those are all things that are political to some extent. So, we may approach politics, but we don't have any particular viewpoint other than we think nature is amazing and gardens are important and California native plants are beautiful. So if you're like an AstroTurf tycoon, you might hate this show. And if you think that poppies and hummingbirds and butterflies are horrible things that shouldn't exist, you might hate this show, but otherwise you're in the right place, and welcome. So I think I want to add just a few other things before we introduce our guest, our first guest, who's actually a TPF staffer, so not really like a guest in the traditional sense. But I want to talk about California Native Plant Week and something I've been thinking about, which is the idea of growing a California native plant. To me, it's the physical embodiment of cultivating your love of this place. You're actually growing your love of California when you grow a California native plant. So with that, I'd like to introduce someone who's grown many California native plants and has cultivated love in many a gardener. So many of you know him. He's one of the premier faces of Theodore Payne Foundation, our director of horticulture, Tim Becker. Tim, what's going on? Oh, unmute.
There we go. Hey guys. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Evan. It's great to be amongst a bunch of California native plants here on the panel and all of you guys out there watching us today. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, I do have an enormous love of native plants. And I think like all of this, it comes from a lot of personal experiences, direct personal experiences I've had with native plants. Going back to when I was a kid. So I'm really fortunate to be able to participate in growing a lot of native plants. And when I was asked to come out and do a presentation, there wasn't really a prompt. So for a horticulturist, someone like me, I have a love for so many different plants. It was kind of like, okay, how do I narrow this down and just talk about plants that I'm stoked on, which it's a very long list. So this group of plants that you see on my desk here are on our kiosk, our sales kiosk. I'm actually in the sales yard. If a lot of you probably recognize this place right now. It was actually, my group of plants was a lot smaller yesterday, and then it kind of tripled overnight as I was going through production and pulling things from both our collections and our sales yard floor. So,
and I'll just add real quick that Tim and his crew are essential workers keeping the plants alive at TPF, and they're working really hard every day to keep our stock going and also to continue selling plants. We have takeout orders for plants. So big shout out to the TPF staff, the horticulture staff, who've been working actually probably harder than normal during the shutdown because there's a lot to do, and it's a whole new system for selling plants. Big shout out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Every member of our team who's here is going above and beyond to make gardening something that you can actually do at home, which is one of these few activities we're allowed to do if you have a garden space or a balcony to do some potted plants. So, you know, we know that everyone's kind of thirsting to connect with nature, and gardening is one of the easiest ways to do that, especially when you're gardening with native plants, which is going to bring all that wildlife straight to you, even when you live in the big city. So yeah, it was kind of, I went through the nursery with kind of a couple different ideas in place. I wanted to feature some of my personal favorite plants. I wanted to feature some plants that we maybe haven't had in a decade or perhaps ever. You know, I've only been working here about 10 years, so I can speak to what we've had available in the nursery. And some of the stuff here on the table I know we haven't had in quite a long time, or not in the kind of volume that would be able to actually meet the demand of a lot of our customers. So I want to bring you guys some rare stuff. Obviously, most of this is going to be highlighting the drought or the resilience of our plants here in California, how they can withstand drought on a regular basis as long as they get good, healthy winter rain. So I do have a camera here so I can get a little macro with this, but I thought I'd start with one of my favorite plants. And I actually did an Instagram post about this recently for Theodore Payne, and that is this little beauty right here. This is Lilium Humboldtii, subspecies ocellatum, which is a plant endemic to Southern California. Lilium Humboldtii grows much more broadly, and its common name is the spotted lily. And it's a member of the Liliaceae family, very closely related to Fritillaries and Cala Cordis and a lot of our other lilies. It's a bulb, and you can see it has this single stalk right here. And this year, we are going to have over 200 of these available as a 1-gallon plant to purchase. And we're going to start to make those available at the beginning of May. You can actually see this one has some flower buds. It's actually starting to develop. So anything with a stalk like this, you know, is going to flower. And it's a really nice plant too, because it's a late flowering species. So this will be blooming in June. And if you guys can Google just the Humboldt lily, you'll be able to appreciate. But if you also go on our Instagram, you'll be able to see a picture of this from a couple days ago. It grows from a scaly bulb that lives underground. Now, the one issue with this for a lot of dry gardens, it is a bit more riparian. So it likes to grow amongst roses and Lamus Canyon Prince and things like that. But I'm very, very excited about having these available to buy, and actually relatively easy to cultivate. But they do take 2 years to get to this point, so they're going to be a bit more on the pricey side. Another plant that I want to show us, and I only really have 2 plants that I would consider riparian. Now this, you guys can see my trash can stand for my computer. Oh my God. Hey.
Tim, can you tell everybody what riparian means in case they haven't heard that word before?
Absolutely. Riparian is basically like a stream side plant. So plants that would be growing in canyons and seeps and things like that, where you would see like Western sycamore growing in our mountains here would be a good indicator species that you could potentially have some of this. Another kind of more riparian plant that I'd like to show us, I'm actually just going to scoot around here. This is a really cool plant that is more from northern central California. This is Lochia Californica, or Dutchman's pipe, California Dutchman's pipe. Now the flower on this, I'll be posting an Instagram post probably later today so you guys can get a picture. It does look, it's a really beautiful flower, kind of looks like a Dutchman's little pipe, and it's related, it's in the ginger family. And there's actually some tropical species which get huge flowers, but it's a really cool vine. And another one that takes a really long time to grow. This was started as a seed in January of 2019. And so it's over a year to get to get ready. So those are some of my riparian plants. And then another couple of different species that I wanted to highlight were bulbs, because I love bulbs, and California has an amazing geophyte diversity. And we've already looked at one. The lilium is a type of bulb. Now this here's another bulb common to all across California. It's one of the more ubiquitous or more widespread. This is soap plant. This is Clara Guam. And the reason I really love this plant is, I just love this like wavy foliage. It's really beautiful. It's ethnobotanically really significant. And it has white flowers that bloom at night, and it's moth pollinated. And that's just one of my favorite features of the plant world, the flowers that come out at night and need to be bloomed by other organisms that are out at night. So you think about like bats and moth pollinated plants. I just think that's a really, the night garden. I would love to have a garden that's just all night blooming.
Totally. So Tim, what's the significance of soap in that plant? Why is it called soap plant?
Now, from my understanding, I'm not like ethnobotanically very inclined, but my understanding is the bulb is used for a multitude of purposes, but the bulb could be pulverized and used to kind of clean fabrics and things like that.
Like make a lather, right? Like
yeah. I believe that's the idea. But
those grow locally.
Oh, they're everywhere. You can see that on any hike you go where you're going to get chaparral or even coast sage scrub. It's going to be it's going to be pretty much everywhere. And the species is Chloroglum pomeridianum. Not quite blooming yet, but ours in the ground is in bud. Now, another bulb, we're going to go back to Liliaceae, and this is a Cala Cordis, which is the Mariposa Lily is the common name. And this one is Cala Cordis Catalina. It's actually a rare plant with a limited distribution just in Southern California and on the islands, I believe. You can see this one has a couple flower buds. It's got a little fruit here. I don't know if that's actually going to make seed, but this is one of the earlier Cala Cordis, really nice. I saw probably tens of thousands of these blooming along the coast after the Woolsey fire. Whoa, and it just took a dive, but no one saw that. So another one.
Oh, sorry. Speaking of things blooming along the coast and elsewhere, I'll give a plug that even though you can't go out and see wildflowers right now because you're supposed to be at home, everybody, our wildflower hotline is still up on Theodore Payne on our website, and you can hear where they're blooming. And maybe if it's close enough to your house, you could go see them, because there's actually a lot of blooms happening right now. One kind of positive note to the corona crisis is we did get rain during this time. So the plants are actually pretty happy right now. And yeah, check out our wildflower hotline.
Cool. So going back to bulbs, onions are actually, there's a pretty broad group of alliums. People know like edible onions, and actually a lot of the onions are edible. This is Allium hyalinum, the glassy onion. It's called the glassy onion because after it gets pollinated, the petals actually become translucent. It's really beautiful, really soft purple. I love it in bud too. I mean, so many of plants, just the beauties in the bud in the form of just something like that, the flower bud all compact and tight. Another allium. Now this one's here, a local species. It's a little bit past prime, but this is Allium hamitica, the red skin onion. And both of these, all of the bulbs so far I've mentioned are available for sale, either as a dry bulb or a live plant. This one's a really nice little eating onion if you want like a fancy onion garnish on a salad or something. Now the last,
I've eaten those before. They're very, very good.
Oh yeah, they're delicious. Sorry for that bump, guys. So one of the last bulb type is a Delphinium. So people are probably pretty familiar with like garden larkspurs. They're in the Ranunculaceae family, the buttercup family, I believe. But there are a lot of species of native Delphiniums, and they're usually actually pretty dry adapted. The most common one people will see around here is the Delphinium cardinalis, the scarlet larkspur. This one is Perii. It's a nice, beautiful, like blue, purple, almost iridescent. See the pollen and the anthers in there. So most of the Delphiniums that we grow are going to be for our collection because they're quite difficult to grow. But we do have the cardinalis that will be coming out later this summer. So another area of kind of like botanical interest I think that we pursue here at Theodore Payne is our pursuit of Baja and island species for cultivation, which is pretty common in the trade. Some of the most popular plants that we have come from the island, because kind of what happens, you know, species get transported to islands and then kind of mutate and speciate and become gigantic or become miniature. The island bush poppy is a good example because it is a lot bigger than our local mainland species, bigger flowers, bigger plant, kind of a little bit more lush. And there's a lot of other plants that a lot of you are familiar with, a lot of them we have here. One island plant that I love is the Leptocine gigantea. It's such a crazy Dr. Seuss plant. You can see here the foliage, just kind of this single stalk. The best place to see these in non-COVID times is Point Doom, where you can just see the entire kind of point covered in yellow flowers with a sweet perfume. And they're all like daisy flowers, but love this plant. It's so like succulent and stocky. It's such a goofball.
And those bloom early. They come like sometimes like February, late February, early March, around Malibu on the coast. They'll just be going crazy. It's so beautiful. And then they turn to like just like dried like logs basically in the summertime.
Yeah, they go completely dormant, but it's kind of interesting. I've gotten some finally to grow underneath our Lionothamnus because here in Sun Valley, you know, we get 115 degree days sometimes. So it's can be kind of difficult to cultivate this one. And it also gets quite cold. So ours are oddly just starting to bloom, but I think it's partly due to our colder winters and the shadier conditions. So yeah, very cool one. Now, something I'd like to bring your guys' attention to, this is a plant first introduced to me by Bart O'Brien from the garden formerly known as Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Garden, now California Botanical Garden. This is Arctostaphylos australis, or the southern manzanita. Now, we've had a stock plant on our ground for a couple years, and this is the first time to my recollection that this plant has been made available in our sales yard, at least for the past 10 years, in a decent volume. So we actually haven't even sold, maybe we've sold one, but this is such an awesome manzanita. It's very rounded. It has a really round structure, really nice, tight, round structure. Really beautiful foliage as it becomes more mature, and quite a late bloomer. So it's one of the later bloomers to hit, and a kind of a nice soft pink, more open inflorescence. Moving more to the deserts, I mean, how can you not love that? That is the beaver tail cactus, Opuntia basilaris. You can understand why, you know, we think about deserts as being very bleak, and they often are in terms of like their coloration. So plants need to be able to attract pollinators from really far away, and what better way to do it than make something like that? It's insane. You could just bathe in pollen there if you were a bee. Very, very nice.
I have one of those in my front yard blooming right now. It's
oh yeah.
There's a lot of like kind of rare sub varieties of that, which we should start to look into cultivating those too.
Yeah, they're very, very nice. Another one I'd like to take you to check out right now. Now, this actually looks like it might be some kind of like succulent, water-loving plant, but this is a really interesting member of the Plantaginaceae family, which is the family that many of you are familiar with, as it has penstemon in it, Kekiella, Collinsia. A lot of our really, like some of our staple garden plants are in the Plantaginaceae, the antirhinums, but this is Morandella antirhiniflora, a vining snapdragon. So it is a true vine, and you can tell from the flowers it's in the snapdragon family. So let me see if I can focus that there. Very beautiful. And the interesting thing about this species is that it actually has two color forms. So if you go to CalFlora, a great resource, and look up the vining snapdragon, you'll see that there's purples, pinks, and reds. And we have this red one, and we're trying to clone it through cuttings. But this was, you can kind of see it doesn't have the best stem, but it's developed pretty good.
That goes dormant in the summer, right?
Yeah, it goes pretty dormant. Morandella red, question mark? Looks pretty red to me. Reddish. Now, another plant in the Plantagenaceae family that we have currently in our stock, which is not selling, and I can't understand why, is Penstemon pseudospectabilis. Look at that. Such a nice fluorescent pink color. Super drought tolerant species of Penstemon. This one we bought in from another grower. You guys know we do that. You know, we don't grow 100%. I mean, as nursery people too, we want to be able to supply the coolest plants out there. So buying plants from other nurseries is just part of the game. And that's how we have the best selection.
I bought one of those, Tim. I just bought one of those, put it in my front yard.
So cool. So another desert species. And sticking around to the Baja vibes, I'm sure a lot of our customers, people watching, have had this plant in their garden. This is Solanum hinzianum. Look how big. I always like to use my hand in the flower shot just to give you an idea of the relative size of these flowers. Look at that fat flower. So this is, the common name is Mariola. And this plant would be found in Baja California and Vizcainoa kind of woodland, which is a cool shrub related to creosote out there growing on the coast. It's got these mean spines. So if you need a defensive plant, it kind of has a more like open growth habit, but they can get pretty big. I think like 10 feet or so. Very beautiful. And I love the foliage too. Is really nice, kind of more of like an olive as opposed to a darker green. Let's see, what else do we have here? Ooh, and another one. This, I'm sure a lot of you have bought or picked up one of these. I'm going to go around to the other side now. This is something that Medina Asbel, our former director of horticulture, planted out 2 specimen Rus lentii, or the pink flowering sumac, in 2015. And the plants have now just become big enough to really develop a lot of vegetative material so that we can take cuttings. And while you can produce this one from seed, we have discovered that it's quite easy to do from just a simple cutting. You can actually see that this is our cutting from a year or so ago, and it's developed really nicely, has a pretty nice structure, but we're growing these in commercial quantities to make available. It is a little frost tender, so if you have regular frosts, it can just not be quite as big or suffer, but it's got really rounded leaves. And if you're familiar with sugar bush or lemonade berry, they're all related. They're all in the Anacardiaceae, actually, the sumac or the poison oak family. So really nice. And then very bright pink flowers.
I think that the Rus are like the unsung heroes in the native plants. People should be using them for evergreen hedges. Anytime you need an evergreen hedge, go for a Rus. It's gonna do you well. You can prune them.
Absolutely. All of the Ruses are some of the most versatile shrubs. They're great for either a foundation shrub, or like you saying, a pruned or formal hedge, or a more open. But yeah, very sculptural, very hedgeable. And they all actually have really beautiful both flowers and fruit. Rus ovata, for example, I feel like that's either in flower or fruit like over half the year. It's always got something interesting going on. And they look great all year round, which is one of the complaints sometimes of native plants, is the summer dormancy, which of course we're going to have plants that go dormant in the summer when there's no rain. But a lot of plants are adapted to go through that summer while still.
Can we talk about that for a sec?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. Like, so I'm from the East Coast originally, and I always think about this, like nobody on the East Coast expects flowers and foliage in the middle of winter, right? Like it's winter. The leaves fall off and it's kind of a little drab. Like why can't we just do that here in California and think in the summer, like we expect it to be less flowery and green? Because if we did that, right, it would be way more sustainable from a water perspective. You know, not to say that you can't have some plants that'll retain foliage throughout the season, but like I've always thought of that where it's like if we just foliage of the seasons that do exist here, we would be way more like in a way better, way more sustainable approach to how we manage our landscapes.
Yeah, I think understanding, our ecology here, and that's like a first step in just understanding how your garden will look throughout the year. Understanding what plants do and how they look in a wild setting is kind of, I think, a good balance to what you should expect in your garden, for sure.
I think there can be beauty in that too, like a very like dry, desiccated chaparral or coastal sage scrub habitat like can have its own inherent beauty, and it's really in the eye of the beholder. So it's like,
yeah, and I think we have options for everyone, right? You want something that's going to look a certain way or be very green. The Carex lawn is a huge thing in native plant gardening, and that's like a lush green look that you can still achieve while watering only once every week or two. So I think you can, in a lot of ways, get any aesthetic that you are looking for as a gardener. If it's the green, lush, verdant, I mean, some of these plants I already mentioned, they require water, and but putting water in the garden, it's a way to bring in wildlife too. So I think both strategies are really fun.
I see a future Poppy hour episode of embracing the colors of summer in native habitat and expanding our ability to appreciate that aesthetically.
I'm down with that. Episode. We'll do that. So Tim, as we're kind of transitioning to our guests here, and I hope you can stay on for this conversation if you're willing to. Well, first of all, hopefully if you're watching, that inspired you, all those beautiful plants. For California Native Plant Week, we're celebrating it. We just wanted to wow you with the different diversity and some of the things that might not be as commonly known, but are totally beautiful and worthy of you trying to grow in your garden. Tim, I wonder, could you do a quick pano around the sales yard? People are probably missed coming to TPF. We are like starting to think about, when we can reopen. We're looking forward to doing that at some point. We don't know when it's going to be. We're thinking about ways to maintain social distancing and all that. So hopefully we will be open within a reasonable amount of time to visit in a slightly different setup than we had before. But it is a little bit of a shame because it's so beautiful on the grounds right now. So much is in bloom.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like we're getting into the peak season of things being in flower and just that lushness of spring. It pains us to miss that, but we're still moving a lot of crops down, and it is really nice. I feel like this precious moment to be in the nursery. I'm here alone. It's really quiet except for the birds. Just like this crepuscular hour with the wind blowing. I hope some of that's getting through in this video.
Hour.
Yeah, the golden hour. Look at these rays. So I'm sure a lot of our customers have been here when we do our plant moves, but yeah, Theodore Payne grows most of what we sell, and we just brought down about 2,500 crops that we all lay out here on this gravel. And we have so many different things available for you guys. I mentioned roses. We have this really nice cultivar of rose that would go really well with your lilium if you were planning on planting that. The ever beloved Salvia spathacea. Oof, so nice.
One of my favorites, unbeatable smells.
Oh yeah. So this is we have one of our plants of the month, Salvia Shirley's creeper, the unsung hero of the Salvia mellifera ground cover world. Such a nice one. All the Salvia mellifera to me are there's like some chocolatey sweetness in there. So this is 20% off for members, as well as a couple of other plants that we have for sale. And I mentioned the Clara Guam. You guys got to come and get them. Look at this. We got 20 for sale right now. Look at those beauties.
So we could keep doing this for hours and hours, and I think we will have to have Tim as a recurring guest on the show. Tim is juggling a lot with his kid and lack of daycare, and as we all are. But I want him to be on this show a lot because he's a wealth of knowledge and he knows a lot of cool, beautiful plants. And so I'm thinking we should probably very nice, Facilia.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking, thank you, Tim, for showing us all that. And I hope everybody is feeling inspired for California Native Plant Week. We have some great guests with us to have a conversation about California native plants. We thought for California Native Plant Week, we should get the California Native Plant Society here. And so that's who we've got. And if we could bring on Liv O'Keeffe and Nick Jensen. Are you guys with us?
Hey, Evan. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Welcome,
I'm here.
guys. Hey, guys.
Hi,
So,
Evan.
I guess I should introduce you, huh?
Nah.
I didn't really prepare any kind of introduction, but Nick is a good friend of mine. I've known him for years. He's the, what's your title, Nick? Sorry, it just changed. So,
Lead conservation scientist.
lead conservation scientist. And I knew him when he was a lowly graduate student at California Botanic Garden. And Liv is the senior director of communications. Is that correct, Liv?
Yep.
All right, good, for California Native Plant Society. So these guys are the people who are out protecting California native plants and bringing them into everybody's lives. And so we thought it'd be fun to just talk about how can we continue to do, how can we expand that effort? How can we maybe do it a little bit better? So first question, very quick. I know it's a strange time right now, but is there anything special you guys have done to celebrate California Native Plant Week this week?
It's kind of bittersweet, but I think with an emphasis on the sweet. You know, as a communications director, I think anyone working in a lot of fields right now can relate to having this strange period of, you know, going from COVID crisis communications and change management and a lot of things like that into, well, suddenly it's Native Plant Week, and you know, what is that going to look like this year and mean for people? But this like small miracle has sort of happened in the middle of it, where in the process of everybody being in stay-at-home orders and really needing to stay in their neighborhoods, people have become extremely grateful for the little bit of nature that they can get. And I think that that's made Native Plant Week take on a special sort of significance, and a very personal significance for a lot of people. You know, what is right around us? We were talking today with the folks at California Botanic Garden about, you know, native plants next door. You know, what are those plants that are right out your window or right on your neighborhood walk that might be bringing you joy or giving you some hope or a little bit of recreation right now? And so I think that's a big part of what's been on my mind for Native Plant Week this year, and what we've been trying to extend out to our audiences and people we connect with, and around that, you know, is that joy and beauty that our native plants bring us, even at times like this, and especially at times like this. But also this theme of resilience with them too, and the fact that our native plants have evolved to survive and adapt and bring their own lessons in that for us at this time.
Yeah, so I totally agree that that there is this silver lining that people are slowing down their thoughts a little bit and finding more, you know, more kind of direct connection with what's right around them.
Yeah.
I wish that there were more native plants around them in the city of Los Angeles. There are some, like I walk around my neighborhood with my dog and my daughter and my wife, and it's like the only outing we have right now is just walk a couple blocks around our house, and there's a couple of yards that have some salvias and stuff, and there's some well landscaped yards and some poorly landscaped yards, and you know, hopefully, like if we ever have a stay-at-home crisis again, like 20 or 30 years from now, the yards will be much cooler, so that like people like me can have better walks around their neighborhood.
Right. And then some of us might have them around our neighborhoods and not even know that they're there, right? Some of it's a matter of being able to know what it is and spotting it and recognizing that that is a native plant. You know, I think that's half of it too. But yeah, I think it's important to recognize that not everybody can get out to a beautiful trail right now, or maybe some people don't even have yards to garden in. And so it does make it really important that we think about what's in our built environments and what we can bring to them.
For me, I was just kind of thinking that, you know, kind of it's at some level, it's like an absence makes our hearts grow fonder, you know, because I'm looking at the background that I'm using, which is from a beautiful display of wildflowers on a place where I did a bunch of research, Tejon Ranch in Kern County. And I was, you know, part of me gets a little bit sad thinking about, well, I really wish I could go out and see the wildflowers in the desert, or go out to the poppy preserve, because there apparently are some really good shows there right now. But at the same time, I realized that this is a time to sit back and contemplate and think about what we all are so grateful for. These flowers, these habitats, they're not going anywhere really, as long as we don't, of course, pave them over, which is one of the things I do in my day job, is trying to prevent these special places from going away. And so I have no doubt that we all will live to see another wildflower season, and that gives me some solace, some confidence that there will be future years, and so that's kind of, we all are taking this kind of in some ways really drastic step to stay home, and that will enable, so most of us, the grand majority of us, to have future wildflower seasons.
Yeah, and actually, like, this is sort of a tangent which we don't have to really explore, but staying at home is it's probably, like, it is in so many ways, like, better for the environment. We're burning less fuel, and just, like, I read something about the Earth is vibrating less or something like that because there's so much fewer vehicles driving on it. So there may be, like, this, we may look at this period and be like, hey, like, that was when we became like, we started living sustainably.
Right.
But in that case, like, it's funny, I just had a conversation earlier this week on a panel discussion that's actually online right now with UCLA Botanical Garden, if anyone wants to check it out, about nature in cities and how that's the nature that many people have. And that's great. Like, I'm an equal opportunist nature lover. So if seeing an aloe inspires you, that's great. If people are going to hate me for saying this, but oh God, maybe I shouldn't say this actually. I was going to say, seeing a patch of aloe,
you can't do that, Evan.
With spider webs on it. If that like jazzes you and you get interested in the world, like, so be it. I hope that's like a hook to get people their first, hey, what's that spider doing? Hey, what's that? Is there a mouse hiding under there? Is there a sewer rat? Whoa, that's weird. Those are like the hooks, and then we can go from there to, well, it's a lot more nuanced than that. And there's this thing called indigenous biodiversity. And so my question to you guys is, how do we make that transition from, well, nature is just cool and I like it, I don't really know that much about it, to there's this very nuanced discussion of, we are trying to save and recreate and restore a very specific type of nature. So that's a big question, but if you have any thoughts on it, very interested to hear.
I think a lot about that, Evan, and I think about it in terms of how do we include people in the conversation who aren't the botanist and the plant nerds right now, but maybe would be if they knew more about it. And not that we want everyone to become botanists and plant nerds, but
well, I mean, would it be that bad?
I don't know. But I think we need to meet each other where we are, right? And I know probably each of us has gone through phases with this, right? I mean, I didn't start where I am right now, and one place isn't better than the other, it's just different. And I started, I think about sort of these stages of where I've gone with the native plant journey. And, it starts with just an awareness that there are these things called native plants, and I think it sounds obvious, but it's like we grow up in California and we know about the redwoods, or we know about California poppies, or we know about Joshua tree, but I don't know if we necessarily think about those as native plants. And so I think that's like one step, is just to start to identify that those are the plants of California, and those are plants that are unique to this place, that define our landscapes. And without those plants, California wouldn't be California. And I feel like, so that's sort of like this initial just awareness and connection to make. And then, for a lot of us, then it happens through gardening. Maybe we start to put some of these plants in our yards, and we realize what happens when you have the right plant in the right place, that it's where it's meant to be, and because of it, it doesn't need all these resources and fussing over it that other plants might need. And maybe you recognize that there's a lot more insects or birds that are interested in that plant than other plants in your yard, and maybe that piques your curiosity and you start to bring in more of those plants. Or maybe you just like the smell of it, it's like more interesting to you than some of the other plants. It's like starting to just build that personal experience, whatever that is. And and then maybe you're out on a hike in your local wildland and you see that there's the same plant there that you have in your yard, or you see a plant on a hike in your local wildland and you think, I wonder if I could grow that in my yard. Or, you just start to build those connections, and it starts to become a richer and richer experience. And,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
One of the things I was going to say is that, I mean, Evan, you were a little afraid that talking about a non-native plant was going to get, tomatoes thrown at you, at least virtually speaking. But just to have people recognize that plants exist is a big thing. A lot of people live in this world with this, blur of green around them, and they're not even recognizing that there's these beautiful functioning organisms that exist on this planet, and are really responsible for, essentially our lives. I mean, we wouldn't eat without plants. We wouldn't be able to eat food without plants because we clearly can't produce our own food. We don't photosynthesize. So there's a transition that happens in the vast majority of people, that they start to recognize plants, and then maybe they start to learn the names of plants, and those plants usually are not going to be, or sometimes aren't going to be native plants, sometimes they are. And many people get attracted to plants through horticulture, and certainly that was my path. And for years I grew non-native plants. When I was it's strange to say, in high school I started growing my own plants, maybe even before high school. And it was later on in life, after high school, that I learned to have an affection for native plants. And so it truly is just I do think of it as a journey, from recognizing plants to being full-fledged, lovers of nature and native plants and landscapes. That's a journey that so many of us take, but it is, and sometimes it's a more circuitous path than for some than others.
Yeah, totally. Can you guys hear like a drilling noise in the background right now? Okay, good. My neighbors have this incredibly elaborate tree fort that goes from like 6 trees, and it has like bridges and like multiple structures, and they're constantly working on it. It's pretty cool, but it makes recording out here difficult.
Sounds like a good quarantine activity, though.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, they built out this tree fort to be like pretty amazing in the last couple of weeks. But I want to take that, Nick, you growing plants early, and then some of the things Liv was saying about like, and maybe we can go through, and Margaret and Tim and everybody can kind of quickly answer this. Like, what was your aha moment when you maybe became interested or realized that this is something you wanted to devote your life to pursuing? I'll start. Why not? Man, I should have thought about this before I did this. I mean, I grew up, like my parents and grandparents were big gardeners. I think that maybe the thing was when my mom paid me to turn over her garden, I realized I could make money gardening. No, that was, and I found worms to go fishing. I remember I was probably like, 5 or 6. I think I got a couple of bucks to buy candy, and I got worms to go fishing. I was like, man, gardening's pretty cool.
I've always been attracted to plants. I remember being so mad when I was growing a lima bean plant as a 2nd grader, and a snail ate it just as it was like getting really big. I was really upset about that. And I've always loved to grow things. I had an inclination to name plants from the time I was young, but I didn't have any awareness of native plants. I wasn't exposed to that. And it wasn't until I was older that I started to, do backpacking and hiking, and started to, get interested in the local flora, and do native gardening on my own, that I started to develop that relationship. But I think it's like for me, it was a series of aha moments, not like one major one. But I do think one big one came for me when I started working for CNPS. I thought I knew a lot, or not a lot, but I thought I was pretty, savvy to native plants. But I actually had no idea that California was one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, and that it was, largely because of our native plants. And that just blew me away. And once I learned that, I just wanted everybody to know that, because I don't think many Californians know that and know what we have here is really, really unique.
Should I go now? Yeah. So there isn't a time in my life that I can remember not liking plants. I was, both of my parents worked, and my grandmother took care of my sister and I. And we ended up, spending a lot of time outside in her garden. It wasn't a native plant garden by any means. There was, there were lots of dahlias and begonias. And for me, like, the transition to native plants really happened right after high school. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went for, I think it was about a year and a half. I went to school at Foothill College in Los Altos Hills. And they have a really nice native plant garden. I think it's called Native Hill. And I remember distinctly, very fondly, falling in love with the smell of the flora of California in that garden. There's sages and ceanothus, and I remember, on a morning, in the morning dew, and just being able to smell all the different plants, and that's really one of the hooks for me, was the smell of the California flora, the aromatic nature of so many of our native plants. And, not to be so cliche here, but my love of native plants blossomed from there. And I, ended up, doing, becoming a botanist, getting a PhD in botany, and then now spending my days fighting for its conservation. And so there's a lot of folks else who have to go. I could wax on about my love for the flora and my personal journey, but I'll let somebody else go.
Yeah, I want to hear Tim's story.
Yeah, I definitely didn't fall in love with plants from a young age. I mean, I always liked going into nature, and my first real passion plant-wise wasn't for native plants at all. It's for growing food. And honestly, up until college, like, one of my most distinctive memories of plants isn't even a very good one. I remember I was like this sad, chubby fifth grader on science camp, like missing my mom super bad, and we had to do all these hikes, and I was like, this kind of sucks. And like, I remember getting super like harshly stabbed by a yucca, which I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that I got like poked with a yucca, and no one believed me that it really hurt. And I was like, all right, nature and chaparral is, I don't know if that's for me. So I think my first memory, of native plants from science camp was kind of subpar. But luckily I did, in college, I still was like totally, had zero direction, but I stumbled on this farm in Santa Cruz, which is really where I started to care about plants. It was, for like directionless college students, I think farming is a really good pastime, and it just kind of turned into the thing I love to do. And I really thought I was going to be a farmer. Another like obvious naive college student, like thinking they were going to be a farmer in LA somewhere and have a real life. But I also in college took natural history, which really kind of solidified my love of native plants, because I was able to go to some of the most pristine parts of California through the UC Reserve System, which they own maybe 50 properties throughout the state. So I was going to places like Santa Cruz Island and the Mojave Desert. And so, I kind of was able to fuse those when I wanted to move back to LA. And actually, I fell in love with native plants, and I love to actually grow plants. So this job, being a production manager at a little native plant nursery, was kind of, all it took. And 10 years later, here I am.
I need to hear more about this science camp. We're gonna discuss this.
Mega trauma science camp.
I want to see a photo of you as a chubby fifth grader, please, next time.
Yeah, we can hit up my mom. She,
Margaret, Margaret, what's your story?
Okay, what's my story? So, I actually spent a significant amount of my childhood playing in the Tahunga Wash, which is pretty close to the Theodore Payne Foundation. And I never knew about Theodore Payne Foundation until my early 20s. But I was the kind of kid that really learned about, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest in 4th grade and was just like horrified. And I think that really set me on a trajectory to care about the environment generally, and then ask questions like, what can we do? Like, what can we do? And I think I've also always found being in wild spaces as a place that's far away from kind of the toxic mental effects of consumerism. So really healing and nice to be out in nature. But my conceptualization of landscapes was like wild plants versus garden plants until after college, I started taking classes in landscape design and permaculture, and then came to native plant horticulture. And I learned about all the specific relationships in our ecosystems and how everything is really connected and site specific. And I really fell in love with the aesthetics of our California native plants. And yeah, I don't know, it's been well over a decade that I've been working with them. So that's me.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to add a tiny bit to mine because I talked about my initial, digging for earthworms and getting a couple of bucks to buy candy in my mom's garden. But I have a really nerdy California native plant origin story, which was, I'm from the East Coast, so I'd worked with native plants on the East Coast, and I got a job working in the Harvard Herbarium, where I studied pressed specimens that were like 150 years old of California native plants. And so I spent a year just like sifting through these like ancient museum specimens of California native plants, and that's really what convinced me to move here. And so yeah, that's kind of cool to know like the history. And it was just such a wild landscape that was, very recently kind of brought, very recently colonized by Europeans. So fascinating stuff. I liked your mention of escaping consumerism, Margaret, as I pitched the TPF Datura shirt, which everyone should buy. They're for sale on our e-store. Yeah, support small businesses. That's not toxic consumerism. Small businesses need support right now. So I'm going to wrap up going around the circle one more time with the question, because this show tries to look towards the future and tries to build consensus towards where we headed as a culture and how can we bring a more enlightened approach to the way that we manage our landscapes and think about our interaction with the environment. So in the year 2100, what will we be celebrating for Native Plant Week? And we'll start with Liv.
Okay. All right. So I think we could look at it two ways. I'll put a happy spin on even the bad one. Okay. So we can be in this trajectory where we never fully recognize our natural world around us and what it's doing for us, and we continue on a trajectory of abuse of nature and not understanding our dependence on it, interdependence with it. And so 2100 Native Plant Week is a scenario, let's say it's post-apocalyptic and things have gotten really bad and we're in a really, really bad pandemic, but there's a happy ending because it turns out that a California native plant has turned out to provide the cure for this pandemic. And the only reason we have that cure is because people back earlier in the century were seed banking some of our rare plants, some of our rare California natives. And it just so turns out that one of those obscure scrappy plants that everyone thought was kind of ugly and didn't understand why we were fighting for it, turned out to be the cure to this pandemic. So we're really actually finally celebrating California native plants and California Native Plant Week in 2100.
Plant medicine. All right, let's let's go down the line with Margaret. Margaret, what's your 2100 celebration for Native Plant Week?
So in the year 2100, California Native Plant Week is just Native Plant Week, and it's celebrated everywhere in the world. Urban environments everywhere will have been landscaped with a minimum of 60% local native plants. This is in the urban environments, and the remaining 40% are edibles and medicinals for people to use locally. Wildlands will be 100% vibrant native ecosystems across the globe, and biodiversity is considered the truest form of wealth everywhere. The native plants in the oceans will also be revered. Of course, we know now that algae actually creates cloud cover above water, as mushrooms and fungal hyphae networks create cloud cover above forests. And in the year 2100, Native Plant Week will be filled with global festivals celebrating the sacredness of native plants and ecosystems as crucial to human life. And these festivals will be celebrated in extravagant, mindful, and ecological ways, because humans everywhere will realize the truth. They'll know the truth by then, that we're not separate from the environment. We're an extension of the environment. And the definition of what a human being is will be made clear. From the microbiomes in our stomachs and our noses and our ears, we are actually comprised of a series of ecosystems, and the health of the ecosystems within us are directly related to the health of the ecosystems in the outside world. And in fact, these global native plant sacred festivals, there'll be deep rememberings of this, and healings will occur, and acknowledgement of the porous boundary between the spaces that we designate as inner and outer will be ritualized, reconceptualized, and celebrated.
Whoa, yes.
I kind of took some time thinking about that.
Tim, no pressure. That's a tough act to follow. What's your 2100 Native Plant Week celebration?
Well, first of all, the cemetery where I'm buried is not covered in turf. It's a wild jungle where my family celebrates my life as a famed California native plant horticulturist. Theodore Payne has celebrated its millionth sale of trichosimal lanatum, and people are still killing it because they love it that much still 100 years, 80 years from today. Yeah, and native plants are the norm. It's almost like we wouldn't even call them native plants. They're just plants that we use because they're the ones that grow here. I think a lot of our vision of the future is where it just, native plants are normalized. They're not a niche thing. They're not something that we have to add extra adjectives to explain what they are. They're part of the policy of cities to install in their public landscapes. And yeah.
All right. So Nick, 2100 Native Plant Week celebration.
All right. So noting that I'm most likely, well, actually with all probability will not be alive in 2100. I'm going to say, I want 2100 to reflect the fact that my current profession is no longer needed. So let's say that, so I think it's accepted that with COVID-19, we've all taken some pretty drastic steps and quickly. And I think what we'll need to do to save the biodiversity of Earth and to make these grand changes is kind of exactly along the lines of what we've decided to do to save each other from the global pandemic. And to me, that provides a fair degree of evidence that not only, that we are actually capable of doing that. And so in 2100, in my vision of what this world looks like, is that we've decided that we can act collectively and that we can choose to make decisions that are good for ourselves individually, but largely are good for society as a whole. And what will that could be reflected in is a multiplication of these efforts in the future, in that we decide to battle things like climate change and the loss of biodiversity. And we multiply our efforts that we're taking in this time to battle a pandemic to battled these crises of the way our society views nature and the way that we use resources. And that results in saving all of biodiversity. And so we don't need conservation advocates anymore. And because that's our collective goal as a society, is to save our wild habitats and wild plants.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so my 2100 botanists and horticulturists and gardeners and landscapers and designers and architects are, with their deep knowledge of the natural world and how to combine it with the human living spaces, they're like the elite members of society, and they're all filthy rich. And they're just completely loaded. And so to celebrate California Native Plant Week, they donate all their money to charity. And because hunger has been solved and disease has been eradicated and human rights have been all addressed and all nature has been protected, they donate all that money to esoteric art projects and making beautiful music and art and making weird shows like Poppy Hour. So thank you guys for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week. We'll be talking about restoration with Charlie Del Rosa from, I'm sorry, we have one more 2100. I didn't see him on, but we have Philip Otto, who's been working diligently this entire time, switching cameras around. He's our director of the show and our tech mastermind. What is your 2100 Native Plant Week celebration?
Thank you, Evan. In the year 2100, I'll be celebrating Native Plant Week, sitting in stillness and communing with the native plants of my past, present, and future. I will bow my head in gratitude, reflecting on the radical transformation that has occurred over the past 3/4 of a century. It is difficult to imagine a time when our society was not in symbiosis with the natural world and plants weren't at the center of it, when people weren't farmers, cooks, or gardeners, when factories and workshops temporarily occupied what is now wildlands, farms, kitchens, and gardens, when everyone wasn't a steward of the land.
Hear, hear. That was very beautiful. Thank you, Philip. Thank you guys for tuning in to Poppy Hour. We're now going to open it up and have our actual Poppy Hour. I'm going to go to the fridge and get a beer, and let's bring some panelists up. Margaret, let's have some people who've been tuned in and are still hanging out. What's your 2100 vision for Native Plant Week celebrations?
Okay, I'm gonna start asking people to start their video and invite some people up. We have Kathy Chavez Morris from DWP, who may or may not get in on this. And I'm gonna put us into that fun, weird panel mode where we can see everyone. I'm gonna invite Teresa and Yvette from Metropolitan. These are our sponsors. Thank you for sponsoring Poppy Hour. This is amazing. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, this is all an experiment that came out of the pandemic. And here we are today with friends sponsoring us. It's really, really great. Thank you. And yeah, if anyone wants to share their vision for 2100, please unmute yourself and chime in. And I'm seeing Rick Nolan, who's a garden owner from the Native Plant Garden Tour in Long Beach. And there's Tuchis. Hi, Tuchis. Holly, who's on our board. Hello, greetings. Jennifer and David, Philip's parents. Orchid. Woo. Hi, Orchid.
Hi, Margaret. I'll jump in.
Yeah.
You know, actually, Evan brought up a point early on that I was thinking when I took a walk the other night. I took a pretty long walk around my neighborhood, and I realized how ugly so many of my neighbors' yards are. And I'm like, they're just bad, like either bad grass or nothing, or and I'm like, I realized, like, God, I guess it's a luxury to have a nice yard. I didn't really ever sort of think about that. And I live in a nice area. So I think would be amazing is to just have like a block where everyone's got natives, and you know, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know if they all follow a theme or something, but just that like everyone in an area celebrates the natives. So I thought that'd be actually kind of a cool project for Theodore Payne to do, or something, to recruit some neighborhood to do their whole street in natives.
Yeah, that's my dream, that a whole neighborhood will go native. That I think that needs to happen soon. Right on.
Yeah.
Every year I say when we coordinate the garden tour that my goal is to eventually not have the garden tour, because it'll be sort of pointless once all gardens are native. It'll be sort of redundant. Every year I say when we coordinate the garden tour that my goal is to eventually not have the garden tour, because it'll be sort of pointless once all gardens are native.
Somebody's YouTube is replaying what Philip just said. This is a funny like thing. Yeah. I'm just gonna go crazy and let it be really weird technically.
Feedback loop.
Kathy, how about you? Thank you so much for hopping on and answering questions and getting involved in that. And I know you have a native front yard.
I do. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's about 60% native, and can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Like I always have to check to make sure my video is on and my mic's on. Ours is about 60% native and 40% not. We decided to take out a large portion. We're on a corner, so we took out a large, all of the turf in the front and on the parkway, which was substantial. And because I'm in metropolitans, I'm serviced by my water utility is a metropolitan member agency. I was able to get, I think at that time, roughly $2 a square foot, which is very generous for our customers. Yeah, that's a great way to, you know, it's a great opportunity to, you know, offset the costs associated with a turf replacement.
So that's another thing that'll be obsolete. Everyone will have done the conversion by 2100. But in the meantime, save some money and do it. I mean, can you do it retroactively? Because I just kind of like jumped in. You can? Retroactive?
I'm sorry?
Can you retro, like, I've ripped out my lawn, or most of my lawn, like in the last 6 months, because I just kind of like jumped into it without
So no, and actually it probably might be good if Teresa's on the line, because you can talk a little bit about what the program guidelines that we have for LADWP are slightly more have some additional requirements. But if Teresa's not available, I'm not sure if she's available right now. Yeah, okay, great. Hi.
Hi.
We can tag team this question, because for LADWP, it is, you cannot retroactively seek that reimbursement. You have to come to the website, sign on to the SoCal WaterSmart website, and then apply, you know, specify exactly how much square footage you want to remove. And then you fill out your application, you then do the work after you've been approved, and then you come back to seek that rebate. So it is multiple steps, and it's done that way primarily because we want to make sure that as a customer, you're meeting all of the requirements in order to be able to capture that rebate. So by providing us with your plan up front and us having that discussion with you, we can make sure that it's going to have all of those essential elements that a sustainable landscape would have.
Evan, my advice is if you started tearing out your lawn, you haven't torn out the entire lawn, stop and take a picture.
Okay.
Take a picture of the grass that you have there, and then you can, depending on where you live, I think that you are in a DWP service area, correct?
Yeah.
So then Kathy is your best friend, because that's when you start. You start with the local agency. You start with whoever your water provider is. So if you have grass,
and that's why we always recommend that.
Yeah, take a picture of what grass you have right now, because
I will do that. It's such a cool program.
Of the grass.
What if your property is just, when you got it, just is covered in ivy? I mean, isn't that a water sucking plant too?
Ivy rebate program.
I really, because it has been such a struggle getting rid of this stuff in a non-toxic way, you know, because I'm not using any chemicals at all. It's just brute force. So it's been, I'm on a hillside, and for some reason they thought ivy was great, and it's just, oh.
It's an effective ground cover, but yeah, it's definitely invasive and a nuisance.
Yeah, it's just been, we've been like pulling it, cutting it, and then doing the cardboard mulching over that, and then pulling out whatever roots are there. Mainly just what we started with was rescuing all the oak trees, because it was wrapping around the oak trees and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty nasty.
You'll see the ivy in like wildlands just like randomly taken over, like in older settlements or kind of in the mountains. It's crazy, yeah. And definitely up the oaks. I don't know. Yeah, you don't want to hear my advice.
Is ivy spread by seed at all, or is it just like it has to be planted and then it moves around?
Yeah, how does it grow?
Stolons. Yeah, I think it's just stoloniferous. It just kind of grows along the edge.
It's like vinca or something that like it'll persist forever. In like you can go to like old like cabins in the mountains, and there's just this huge patch of vinca major there.
Oh, that's probably
what never be seeds. Yeah. Keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Wow. Well, we've been pretty vigorous about it. We've gotten patches of our hillside cleared of it, and and still pulling around certain areas. Again, we focused around the oak trees so that the ivy wasn't choking off the roots. But that's what we've been doing, is just digging down and pulling those roots out, and then putting cardboard mulch over that, and then planting native plants along it.
You didn't get to introduce Andrew Chavez with an S. He'll probably be doing yoga on the moon in the year 2100. Something like that.
I'll be 120.
You'll probably be in good health at 120.
Yeah, you're on a good track.
I'll be lonely, but maybe I'll be still around.
Andrew, tell us how you're doing. You're director of operations at Theodore Payne. You're helping see a nonprofit through some incredibly uncertain times. What's up, dude?
Well, I mean, Evan and I are just incredibly busy. If it's not one thing, it's another coming up. But I think it's kind of fun doing all of this and trying to figure out ways to do things that completely outside of the box. I mean, this whole plant pickup system, it's just turned out really great. And today we figured out another way to do pickups for the e-store. So if people wanted to buy seeds or what else do we have? T-shirts and hats, that kind of thing. There's an option now for them to pick it up on our porch. So you can bypass the whole shipping thing. Might need a little bit of working through right now, but I think eventually we'll get it like we do the plant pickups.
Yeah.
You guys, will you guys be opening up your, what was it, 2 years ago when you guys redid the facility, you guys did the improvements. You guys have these wonderful bricks that people could memorialize. Are you going to be doing that still, or is that an ongoing fundraiser? Because it really is lovely. I purchased one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's if there's demand for it, we could definitely bring it back.
We could have funders pave the road from Tuxford to the parking lot at Theodore Payne with sponsored bricks.
No, the rivets are its character. You have to have a crappy road. It just really lets you know you're coming into the rural LA.
I love that crappy road.
Yeah.
I love it.
You know what's so funny is like when I started the job, which was before in the pre-COVID era, I was like dealing with the road and like the fence across the way. I was like, that's the most important thing. And this Corona, I was like, that just went out the window. And as Andrew mentioned, it's almost like we're inside a pinball machine and we're just getting bounced around. as I'm sure all of you guys are in your lives with coronavirus, just trying to like constantly adjust to this new way of life. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, we do have some ideas of things we'd like to build out on the property and make it a little more streamlined. And so I think there'll be some stuff in the next couple of years once we stabilize this period with coronavirus.
Be great.
That crappy road is really permeable though, so I just want to give a
Is
shout
it though?
out.
Yeah, I think water just rolls right off of it.
Yeah, no, it's
It's just dirt.
yeah.
For anyone who
really
hasn't purchased from Theodore Payne recently, I did purchase week before last, and it was super, super convenient. Just filling out the form, and then they designate what area to go to, and they have the plants there. There's no one there, just the plants are there ready for you, and you just load them up and go. Super, super convenient. I gotta hand it to you guys. You really did it very well.
Thank you.
We'll definitely pass that
Teachers.
message on. Yeah, I know the laser focus on making this work for people has just been, people are putting in serious hours to get the orders turned around. So we really appreciate that feedback, but because it's been laborious for our staff for sure, but they're doing it because they know you guys need plants.
Shout out to Flora and Aaron.
Yeah.
Who have they're just been total workhorses, and yeah, it's I'm very proud of them, and it's cool that like people can work in their gardens at this time. I'm really glad that all the stay-at-home orders allow nurseries to remain open. I think it's a good thing. Like, and actually, like that's another silver lining. People's gardens probably look better than they like ever have this spring.
I am noticing a couple half-started projects around my neighborhood. Like they started on the Bermuda grass, and then like halfway up the lawn, they're like, "Oh, a new Netflix series. We'll just do that later." It's kind of like the New Year's resolution, like all these like gym memberships, and then it gets hard. But no, I believe most people are going to persevere, keep gardening. You're right. What else is there to do?
Yeah.
I've been pulling I don't know what it's called. What is the grass that's got this really sharp spears? That's what we've been pulling off. What are those called? What kind of grass is that? That non-native grass?
Is it like a bunch grass, like Smilo grass, or
I don't know. It's really, it hurts. Like it sticks. It almost like a razor, almost like it goes into your clothes, and it's hard to get out.
Oh,
What is brome? Yeah.
Brome, the ripgut brome.
That's called what again?
The ripgut brome. Hey, Nick could probably wax poetic about the ripgut brome. Bromistandrus.
We're yanking that stuff out by hand, and it's so awful.
I don't usually write poetry that includes includes animosity.
You can write hate poetry. That's acceptable.
Yeah, I want to recite it as we yank this stuff out.
Yeah.
It could be a mantra.
Yeah, could be a rap song. It really, you know what? It's a rap song. It's that dirty and nasty pulling that stuff out.
Yeah. No, when it gets in your socks, it's one of the most horrible things that can happen to.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, it's horrid.
Hi.
Is that a question from Georgia?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have two questions. One is I have to have grass partway around my house because of the fire hazard. So there's not much else that I can put here. And some of it's pretty hot. And the traffic is light, I would say, never more than medium, really. And so I wondered if you had a suggestion, because what I had before got kind of crucified in the previous drought that we had. So that's my first question. And my second question is, are you folks going to be growing either Asclepias areocarpa or Californica? Because people are trying to find a Californica, but it's very difficult.
So I can field those questions for you guys. So for the grass, there's a lot of good drought-ish tolerant grasses. San Diego bentgrass, Agrostis pallens, and Bouteloua gracilis they're both warm season. So they're actively growing in the warm season, which I think is actually what you would want. You wouldn't want to choose a cool season grass because it's dry and crispy at the most dangerous time of year, the end of summer, fall. So something like a warm season grass, the blue grama grass or the San Diego bentgrass, and you can buy those as seed. And S&S Seed actually also sells it as a sod. So these are actually like turf grasses, and they're both mowable. So you can make them look really clean and formal, or you can let them get all shaggy and crazy looking. We do have an example of the Bouteloua here at Theodore Payne Foundation, and you can find lots of images of the San Diego bentgrass. And then the other question, what was the other question?
Place that you said had sod.
S&S Seeds sells a sod.
They do? Oh, okay. Thank you.
I believe so. If you look up like native sod, I think you can find that.
And then
Well,
Yeah. So I think we're getting towards the end here, and we want to just thank everyone for tuning in this week. We want to thank our sponsors. We're so excited to have you guys on board. Thumbs up to you, and we look forward to next week. We're going to be talking about restoration with Charlie De La Rosa from San Diego Zoo. Really interesting guy. For his PhD dissertation, he created a computer program that would track GoPros on cows so he could study what plants they were eating. He's just a brilliant, like, he's like a Renaissance man. That's how I describe him. He's just like, he's a fencer and a brilliant biologist, and knows a lot about like Greek mythology. He's a really interesting character. So he'll be a lot of fun, and we will welcome you guys and your comments, and we can't wait to see you next week. And happy Native Plant Week, everybody. Thank you, Nick and Liv and Tim.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
We'll also have a Lake Sharp on next week before Charlie. So we'll have a garden in Echo Park, and then we'll get more philosophical with Charlie. Thank you all.
Thank you, Theodore Payne.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
coffee hour.
Everyone.
Yeah.